My name is Ashley, and at 29 years old, I was supposed to be living my fairy tale ending. James had proposed with the perfect ring and the perfect words. Then my sister Megan decided she wanted him for herself, just 2 months before our wedding day. When they betrayed me, my family actually celebrated their relationship, telling me I was never good enough for him anyway. But when the truth about his empty bank accounts and her calculated lies finally came out, I was the only one left smiling. Before I tell you how I went from heartbroken to victorious, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, hit subscribe, and stay to learn why authentic people always win in the end. I never thought my life would turn into something straight out of a daytime drama. Before everything fell apart, I was just a normal woman building a career I was proud of in Chicago. As a marketing executive for a growing tech company, I worked hard for my success. 60-hour weeks were standard, and networking events filled my weekends, but I loved every minute of it. My apartment might have been small, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, in a neighborhood I had chosen. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Milwaukee, I learned early that nothing comes easy. My parents, Thomas and Laura Matthews, raised me and my younger sister Megan in a comfortable home. But there was always an unspoken dynamic in our family. Megan, younger than me by 2 years, was the golden child from the moment she was born, with her perfect blonde curls and bright blue eyes. While I had to maintain straight, as to earn praise, Megan got celebrated for C's. When I won first place in a regional debate competition in high school, my parents missed it for Megan's soccer practice. It was just how things were. Ashley, why can't you be more like your sister? Became the soundtrack of my childhood. Megan was sociable, bubbly, the life of every party. I was serious, driven, and focused on building something meaningful. By the time I finished college, I had accepted that my path would be different from what my parents had imagined for me. When are you going to settle down and find a nice man? My mother would ask during our weekly phone calls. Despite my promotions and achievements, your biological clock isn't getting any younger, she would remind me, as if I might have forgotten my own age. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious materialized until James. I met him at an industry conference in downtown Chicago. He was representing his investment banking firm, giving a presentation on market trends that had the entire room captivated. James Thompson stood 6'2" with dark hair and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was 32, educated at Princeton, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. Our first conversation happened at the hotel bar after the day's events. I had questions about his presentation, and he seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives on digital marketing strategies. Most people in finance don't understand what marketing actually does, he said, ordering us both another round. But you clearly know your stuff, Ashley. It's refreshing. That night turned into dinner, which turned into a walk along Lake Michigan under the stars. By the end of the conference, we had exchanged numbers and made plans for the following weekend. The next 18 months were everything I had never allowed myself to hope for. James was attentive, ambitious, and seemed to value my career as much as his own. He sent flowers to my office just because it was Tuesday. He remembered small details about my colleagues and asked about them. He made space in his penthouse apartment for my things and never complained when work kept me late. "You and I are the same," he told me one night as we shared a bottle of wine on his balcony overlooking the city. "We understand that success takes sacrifice." When he proposed, it was a perfect spring evening on the Chicago riverfront. He had arranged for a private dinner cruise, champagne, and a photographer to capture the moment he got down on one knee. The diamond was so large I was almost embarrassed to wear it to work. "We're going to build an empire together," he whispered after I said yes. I believed him completely. My parents were ecstatic when I called with the news, not because their daughter was happy, but because James represented everything they had always wanted for me. Finally, my mother sighed with relief. "I was beginning to worry you'd be alone forever with all your focus on that job." When I brought James home to meet my family, my father clapped him on the back like the son he never had. My mother fussed over him, serving his favorite foods after quizzing me extensively about his preferences. And Megan, well, Megan was Megan. My sister had grown from a favored child into a beautiful woman who expected the world to bend to her will. At 27, she had bounced between 3 different college majors, worked various jobs that never lasted more than 6 months, and lived in our parents' basement until she figured things out. But the moment she laid eyes on James, something shifted in her expression. "Well done, sis," she said, hugging me tightly while looking at him over my shoulder. "He's absolutely gorgeous." I should have recognized the familiar competitive gleam in her eyes. Throughout our childhood, anything I had, Megan wanted. My favorite sweater would mysteriously end up in her closet. The boy I had a crush on in 10th grade became her boyfriend a week after I mentioned his name. Even my college choice suddenly became her dream school after I received my acceptance letter. But I wanted to believe we had outgrown that childish rivalry. I was getting married. I was happy. Surely Megan would respect that boundary. The wedding planning began immediately. James and I set a date for June the following year, booked a historic hotel ballroom downtown, and began assembling our guest list of 200 people. I found a dress that made me feel like royalty, and James seemed just as excited about the details as I was. "Whatever you want, babe," he would say when I showed him invitation samples or floral arrangements. "This is your day." I asked Megan to be my maid of honor, of course. Despite our complicated history, she was my sister. She squealed with delight and hugged me, promising to throw me the most amazing bachelorette party Chicago had ever seen. Looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. Sometimes James would become strangely secretive about his phone, turning it face down when I entered the room. He occasionally canceled our plans last minute, citing work emergencies that he couldn't explain due to client confidentiality. Once or twice, I noticed discrepancies in stories about where he had been or who he had met with, but I brushed them aside. After all, everyone told white lies sometimes, right? The first real hint of trouble came when James started receiving texts from Megan about wedding surprises. When I accidentally saw one pop up on his phone and asked about it, he seemed momentarily flustered before regaining his composure. "Your sister wants to plan some special moments for the wedding," he explained smoothly. "She swore me to secrecy." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative was unthinkable. 6 months before the wedding, I began to notice subtle changes in James. Our daily good morning texts became sporadic. Our dinner conversations, once flowing easily until midnight, now felt forced and ended early. 3 times in 1 month, he called to say he would be working late and not to wait up. I tried to be understanding. The financial sector was demanding, and I knew firsthand how careers could sometimes consume your life. Then I found the texts. I wasn't snooping, not really. James had asked me to check his phone for an email confirmation while he was in the shower. But when I unlocked his screen, a message from Megan appeared. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Same place at 3? My stomach dropped. I scrolled up, seeing dozens of exchanges between them, talking about meeting for coffee, discussing wedding details, and several messages with inside jokes I wasn't part of. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the familiarity between them felt wrong. When James emerged from the bathroom, I confronted him immediately, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why are you and Megan texting so much? And meeting up without telling me?" James looked startled but recovered quickly. "She's helping with wedding plans," he said, taking his phone back. "She wanted to surprise you with some special touches. I thought it was sweet. But why keep it a secret from me?" "Because they're surprises, Ashley," he said, his voice taking on that slightly condescending tone he sometimes used. "Your sister wants to do something nice for you. Why are you turning this into an issue?" I felt ashamed for questioning him, for allowing my old insecurities about Megan to surface. I apologized and tried to push my concerns aside. A week later, my parents invited us over for Sunday dinner, something they had started doing regularly since the engagement. I noticed immediately how Megan had positioned herself beside James at the table, peppering him with questions about his work and laughing too loudly at his jokes. "Investment banking sounds so fascinating," she gushed, touching his arm. "I always wished I had taken finance classes in college." My father nodded approvingly. James, my boy, you'll have to give Megan some career advice. Ashley got all the ambition, but Megan here could use some direction. I'd be happy to, James replied, smiling at my sister in a way that made something twist inside my chest. My mother, setting down a plate of roast beef, sighed dramatically. It's such a blessing that you're both getting along so well with James. A lot of siblings don't welcome new family members like this. We're practically family already, Megan said, raising her wine glass in a toast. That night, I tried to reconnect with James by planning a weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin. I spent hours researching the perfect spot and put down a deposit before telling him. I thought we could use some time away, just the two of us, I said, showing him pictures of the rustic cabin with its private dock. No wedding planning, no work calls, just us. James frowned, scrolling through his phone calendar. This weekend? I can't, Ash. I have that client meeting in New York, remember? I told you about it last month. He hadn't told me. I was certain of it. But before I could argue, he kissed my forehead and promised we would reschedule for another time. We never did. The following Thursday, my bridesmaid Rachel called me during lunch. I just saw the weirdest thing, she said without preamble. I was at Latitude Coffee downtown, and I swear I saw James and Megan having what looked like a pretty intense conversation. My heart stuttered. Today? Are you sure it was them? Positive. I was going to go say hi, but they seemed so serious I didn't want to interrupt. I thought maybe they were planning your shower or something. That night, I casually mentioned to James that Rachel had seen him. Oh yeah, he said, not looking up from his laptop. Megan wanted my opinion on a gift for you from the family. Something about jewelry options. I told her you prefer white gold to yellow. The explanation was reasonable, plausible, but something didn't feel right. My insecurity grew roots and blossomed into something ugly. I started checking his location more frequently. I found myself scrolling through his emails when he left his computer open. I became the kind of girlfriend I had always despised, suspicious, and needy. And the more I pulled at loose threads, the more James seemed to pull away. In response, I tried harder. I woke up early to make his favorite breakfast before work. I scheduled my meetings around his availability. I lost 7 pounds from stress, but pretended it was an intentional effort to look perfect in my wedding dress. The dress fitting should have been a joyful occasion. My mother and Megan came along with Rachel and another bridesmaid. But as I stood on the pedestal in layers of ivory lace and satin, my mother sighed. I think we should have gone with the other design, she said, circling me critically. This one doesn't do much for your figure. I agree, Megan chimed in. The mermaid style would have been more flattering. You need something to create the illusion of curves. I caught Rachel's eye in the mirror, saw her sympathetic wince, but I just nodded and asked the seamstress to take notes. Later that evening, I mentioned the comments to James, seeking reassurance. Instead, he shrugged. Your sister knows fashion, he said. Maybe you should listen to her suggestions. She's just trying to help you look your best. The floor seemed to shift under my feet. Since when do you care what Megan thinks about my wedding dress? Don't start this again, Ashley, James said, his voice hardening. You're overreacting. This wedding stress is making you paranoid. The next blow came when I was organizing our shared home office and found a receipt from Tiffany & Co. for a platinum bracelet with a heart charm that cost $3,000. I had never received such a gift from James. When I asked him about it that night, his face darkened. You were going through my things? I was organizing the office, I corrected. Who was the bracelet for? It was supposed to be a surprise for our 6-month wedding anniversary, he snapped. Thanks for ruining it. But our wedding was still 5 months away. That would make the anniversary 11 months from now. When I pointed this out, James threw up his hands. This is exactly why I can't surprise you. You analyze everything to death. He stormed out of the room, and I was left feeling like I had done something wrong by asking a simple question. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing and wondering when the man I fell in love with had been replaced by this stranger. The worst part was that I ended up apologizing to him the next morning for not trusting him and making a big deal out of nothing. With 3 months to go before the wedding, I felt like I was drowning in details while simultaneously watching my relationship disintegrate. The invitations had been sent. The deposits were non-refundable. And the gnawing fear in my stomach grew stronger every day. 3 months before the wedding, I received a major promotion at work. After years of 70-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends, I was named Director of Digital Strategy with a corner office and a significant salary increase. I called my parents immediately, hoping finally for the validation I had always sought. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly. "Listen, can we talk later? Megan and I are looking at flower arrangements for the reception, and we need to make a decision today." I swallowed my disappointment. "Sure, Mom, talk later." That evening, I planned a celebration dinner for James and me at Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. I had to pull strings and call in favors to get a last-minute reservation. I bought a new dress, had my hair done, and was waiting with champagne when he arrived home. "What's all this?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I got the promotion," I beamed. "Director of Digital Strategy." "Oh, right, you mentioned they were considering you for that." He kissed my cheek. "Congratulations. But I'm beat. Can we do the fancy dinner another night?" The champagne turned sour in my stomach. I already made reservations. It was really hard to get them. James sighed, checking his phone. "I'm sorry, Ash. It's been a brutal day. Can we just order in? We'll celebrate properly this weekend." We never did celebrate properly. The weekend came and went with James claiming a work emergency that kept him at the office both days. I ate leftover Thai food alone in my promotion dress, wondering why nothing I accomplished ever seemed good enough. The next week brought another disturbing development. Megan showed up at our parents' house for Sunday dinner with her hair freshly colored an auburn shade nearly identical to mine. She had always been proudly blonde, making frequent jokes about blondes having more fun. The new color was striking against her fair skin, but it was the principle that bothered me. Even her outfit seemed to mimic my usual style, trading her typical bohemian flair for a structured blazer and slim pants. "You changed your hair," I said when no one else commented on the dramatic transformation. Megan tossed her newly auburn locks. "Just felt like something different." James mentioned once that he thinks redheads are beautiful. She shot him a quick glance. "What do you think?" Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. "It looks absolutely stunning on you, darling. Brings out your eyes so much more than the blonde did." I watched James carefully, noting how his eyes lingered on my sister a beat too long. "It suits you," he said simply. That night, James was distracted during our dinner, his phone constantly lighting up with notifications. When I asked who he was texting, he turned the phone face down. "Just work stuff. Nothing interesting." But I had seen Megan's name flash on the screen. The wedding shower should have been a celebration of our upcoming marriage. Rachel had arranged it at a beautiful restaurant, with games and gifts and champagne flowing freely. I put on a brave face and tried to enjoy the attention, opening kitchen appliances and lingerie while the women in my life offered marriage advice and ribald jokes. Then came Megan's toast. Standing with her champagne flute, my sister's eyes sparkled with something I couldn't quite name. "To my beautiful sister," she began sweetly. "I never thought she'd find someone who could handle her. Intense personality." Polite laughter rippled through the room. "But James has proven to be exactly what she needs. He's patient, generous, and understanding." She paused, locking eyes with him across the room. "And I should know because we've spent quite a lot of time together planning surprises for this wedding. I've learned exactly what James likes and doesn't like, what makes him laugh, what foods he prefers, all the little details a wife should know." The room felt suddenly airless. There was nothing explicitly inappropriate in her words, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. I looked around, expecting others to notice the strangeness of her speech, but everyone was smiling. My mother was actually dabbing tears from her eyes. "Isn't that sweet?" she whispered to her friend beside her. "The sisters are so close." Later that evening, I went looking for James and overheard his voice from the restaurant's small balcony. He was on the phone, speaking in low, intimate tones. I know, he was saying. "It's complicated right now. Just be patient a little longer." When I stepped onto the balcony, he quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked. "Work call," he said smoothly. "Client having cold feet about an investment." But I had seen Megan slip away from the party minutes earlier with her phone in hand. The next day, I confronted my sister directly. I drove to our parents' house, knowing she would be there alone while they were at their weekly golf game. "We need to talk about your behavior," I said as soon as she opened the door. "That toast last night was inappropriate, and I know you've been talking to James behind my back." Megan's face shifted from surprise to something harder. "You always were the paranoid one," she said, letting me in. "James and I are friends. Is that a crime?" "Friends don't sneak around having private conversations and meetings." "We're not sneaking," she scoffed. "We're planning things for your wedding. If you weren't so controlling, we wouldn't need to keep them secret." "Then why did he lie about talking to you on the phone last night? Why did he say it was a work call?" Megan rolled her eyes. "Maybe because he knew you'd freak out like this? You're so insecure, Ashley. It's exhausting for everyone around you." I felt my hands shaking. "I'm not imagining this. Something is going on between you two." "Nothing is going on," she shouted, her face flushing. "This is exactly why James needs someone to talk to about you. You create problems where there aren't any." I left feeling worse than when I arrived. That evening, I told my parents about my concerns, certain they would see the inappropriateness of Megan's behavior. Instead, they exchanged a look I had seen many times throughout my childhood. "Honey," my father said carefully, "don't you think you might be overreacting? Megan is just excited about your wedding." "She's always been so supportive of you," my mother added. "Why are you always so hard on your sister?" It was as if I was 10 years old again, being told that Megan hadn't really meant to break my science project the night before it was due, that I should be more understanding of her feelings, that I was the older sister and should know better. When I brought my concerns to James that night, his reaction was even worse. "I can't believe we're having this conversation again," he said, pacing our living room. "Your sister has gone out of her way to help with this wedding, and all you do is accuse us of some weird conspiracy." "I'm not saying it's a conspiracy," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm saying there are boundaries being crossed, and it makes me uncomfortable." "The only thing making this situation uncomfortable is your paranoia," he snapped. "Maybe you should talk to someone professional about these trust issues." The gaslighting was so effective, I actually scheduled an appointment with a therapist, convinced I was the problem. But before the appointment arrived, something happened that even I couldn't rationalize away. I had been working late, drowning myself in projects to avoid the growing problems at home. My colleague Diane noticed my exhaustion and the weight I had continued to lose. "Ashley," she said, closing my office door one evening, "what's going on with you? And don't say nothing. Because I've known you for 4 years, and this isn't you." Maybe it was her kindness, or maybe I had just reached my breaking point. But everything spilled out. The suspicions, the gaslighting, the family who never took my side, the fiancé who seemed to be slipping away. Diane listened without interruption, then leaned forward. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer. Are you sure you want to marry this man? Because from where I'm sitting, he doesn't seem to respect you very much." "I love him," I said automatically. "That wasn't my question," she replied gently. That night, I arrived home early and found our shared iPad on the coffee table. James had left it behind in his rush to a dinner meeting. I knew his accounts were synced to it. I knew it was wrong to look. I also knew I would never have peace until I did. His message history with Megan was mostly deleted, but the most recent exchanges remained. Nothing explicitly romantic, but the familiarity was jarring. "Dinner was perfect. Thanks for the recommendation. You always know exactly what I need. Can't wait for tomorrow. Same time?" When confronted, James managed to explain away each message with plausible excuses. The dinner recommendation was for a client meeting. The "what I need" referred to wedding vendor suggestions. Tomorrow's meeting was about my surprise bridal gift. "I'm getting really tired of defending normal conversations," he said, his voice cold. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding until you get these jealousy issues under control." The threat was effective. I backpedaled immediately, apologizing and promising to work on my trust issues. I was so afraid of losing him. of proving everyone right about my inability to maintain a relationship, that I was willing to ignore the evidence in front of me. The final insult came when my parents suggested a family intervention about my increasing paranoia. We sat in their living room, just like we had for family meetings throughout my childhood. My father, mother, Megan, and James formed a united front across from me. "We're worried about you," my mother began. "This suspicion and jealousy isn't healthy. You've always been high-strung," my father added, "but this is beyond normal stress." "I think you might need professional help," Megan said, her face a mask of concern while her eyes remained cold. "Wedding jitters are one thing, but accusing your own sister of trying to steal your fiancé? That's not rational, Ash." James reached across and took my hand, his touch no longer bringing the comfort it once had. "We all love you," he said. "We want you to be happy. But I can't keep defending myself against these accusations. It's not fair to me or to Megan." I looked at each of their faces, these people who were supposed to love me most in the world, and realized I was completely alone. So I did what I had done my entire life when faced with my family's united front. I apologized. I promised to do better. I accepted that I was the problem. With 1 month left before the wedding, I was a hollow shell of myself. I went through the motions at work, finalized details with vendors, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was drowning. With 4 weeks until the wedding, I was scheduled to attend a 3-day marketing conference in New York. It was an important industry event I had been looking forward to for months. But when an important client meeting was canceled at the last minute, I decided to return to Chicago a day early and surprise James with dinner. I stopped to pick up ingredients for his favorite meal, splurged on an expensive bottle of wine, and headed to his apartment where I had been staying most nights. I still maintained my own place, but had given serious thought to subletting it until our lease on a new shared apartment began after the honeymoon. I used my key to enter quietly, thinking I might catch him napping or working from home. The sound of music was playing softly from the bedroom. I set down the groceries, slipped off my shoes, and padded down the hallway to surprise him. The bedroom door was partially open. Through the gap, I could see the unmade bed, sheets tangled, and there they were. James and Megan, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing passionately. Her auburn hair, dyed to match mine, spilled across his chest. His hands, which had once held mine with such tenderness, were tangled in that hair, pulling her closer. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. A strange ringing filled my ears as the world tilted sideways. Then Megan laughed, that familiar tinkling sound that had always been my parents' delight, and something snapped inside me. I pushed the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. They sprang apart, eyes wide with shock and something else. Not guilt, I realized. Annoyance at being interrupted. "Ashley," James scrambled to pull the sheet over them. "What are you doing home?" The absurdity of his question broke through my shock. "What am I doing home?" I repeated, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "I live here." The better question is, what is my sister doing in our bed? Megan didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She sat up, keeping the sheet primly over her chest, and tossed her hair back. "I think it's pretty obvious," she said. "How long?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would destroy me regardless. James and Megan exchanged a look, some private communication passing between them that excluded me entirely. "It just happened," James finally said, the lie transparent. "We never meant to hurt you." 6 months, Megan contradicted him, her chin lifting defiantly. "Since I helped him shop for your Christmas present. We tried to fight it, Ash." "Really? But some things are just meant to be." 6 months, half our engagement. All those late nights and canceled plans, all those secret meetings for wedding surprises. I had been right all along, and yet still somehow felt crazy for not seeing the full truth sooner. "He needs someone who understands him," Megan continued, her voice softening with practiced sympathy. "You were never good enough for him, Ashley. You're too busy with your career, too driven. James needs someone who can put him first." I looked at James, waiting for him to defend me, to contradict this cruel assessment. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, he said weakly. I didn't want you to find out this way. A strange calm descended over me. How exactly did you want me to find out? After the wedding? On our honeymoon? Or were you planning to leave me at the altar? Neither answered, which was answer enough. I turned and walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, leaving behind the groceries, my suitcase, and the life I had thought I was building. In the elevator down to the lobby, I called Rachel. I need somewhere to stay, I said when she answered. I can't go home. What happened? The concern in her voice nearly broke me. James and Megan, I just caught them together. Oh my God, I'll pick you up. Where are you? I gave her the address of a coffee shop near James's building, not wanting to risk running into either of them if they decided to leave. While I waited, I called my parents, certain that this, finally, would be the moment they took my side. Mom, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. I just found James and Megan together. In bed. They've been having an affair for months. There was a long pause. Oh, Ashley, she finally sighed. What did you do? The question knocked the air from my lungs. What did I do? You must have driven him away somehow. James is such a wonderful man. He wouldn't just throw away your relationship for nothing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He threw it away for Megan. Your other daughter, who was in bed with my fiancé. Well, my mother said carefully, Megan has always been more attentive to the men in her life, more nurturing. You've always been so focused on your career. I ended the call without another word. When Rachel picked me up 20 minutes later, I was still sitting in the same position, staring at nothing, my coffee untouched and cold. I've got you, she said, helping me into her car. You're staying with me until we figure this out. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and arrangements. I officially canceled my portion of the wedding, but to my horror, discovered that my parents were discussing the possibility of Megan and James using the venue and arrangements. It would be such a waste, my mother said during a tense phone call. All those non-refundable deposits. I hung up on her again. 3 days after I discovered the affair, my parents called a family meeting. Against Rachel's advice, I agreed to attend, some small part of me still hoping they would come to their senses and support me. I arrived at my childhood home to find James's car already in the driveway. Inside, they were arranged in the living room, like a tableau from my nightmares. My parents sat side by side on the sofa. James occupied my father's favorite armchair, and Megan perched on the armrest beside him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. Ashley, my father began awkwardly. We wanted to talk to you about this situation. Situation, I repeated flatly. You mean my fiancé and sister's affair? My mother winced. There's no need to be crude. What would you prefer I call it, Mom? Their special friendship? Their betrayal pact? This is exactly why we're worried about you, my father interrupted. This bitterness isn't healthy. James leaned forward, his expression arranged in perfect contrition. I never meant for things to happen this way, Ashley. But you have to admit our relationship was struggling. You were always working late, always distracted. So that justifies sleeping with my sister? Nothing justifies hurting you, he said smoothly. And I am truly sorry for the pain I've caused. But I can't deny my feelings for Megan any longer. Megan squeezed his shoulder, smiling down at him with adoration. We want your blessing, Ash. I know it's a lot to ask right now, but family should support each other's happiness. I actually laughed, a sharp, broken sound that seemed to startle everyone in the room. You want my blessing? After you stole my fiancé? Are you insane? No one stole anyone, my mother interjected. James is a grown man who made a choice to cheat on me with my sister. These things happen, my father said awkwardly. The heart wants what it wants. I looked at each of their faces, searching for some sign that they understood the magnitude of the betrayal. There was none. We're thinking of going ahead with the wedding, Megan said tentatively. Using the arrangements that are already in place. The venue won't refund the deposit, and it seems silly to waste it. You want to marry my fiancé in the wedding I planned? The unreality of the moment made me dizzy. Former fiancé, my mother corrected gently. And really, Ashley, most of the arrangements were my ideas anyway. You were always too busy with work to properly engage with the planning. In that moment, with crystal clarity, I understood that I had never truly been loved by these people. Not in the way that mattered. I had been tolerated, occasionally praised when it served them, but never truly seen or valued. I hope you'll all be very happy together, I said, rising from my chair. But don't expect me at the wedding. Any of you. As I walked to the door, James followed me. Ashley, wait, we don't have to end things like this. We could still be friends. I turned to look at him one last time. No, James, we couldn't, because friends don't betray each other the way you've betrayed me. And they certainly don't gaslight each other for months while carrying on affairs with their sisters. I never meant to hurt you, he repeated, his go-to phrase that meant nothing. The sad thing is, I believe that, I replied, because to mean to hurt me, you'd have to have actually thought about my feelings at some point. And clearly, none of you did. I walked out of my childhood home that day and didn't look back. The complete collapse I had been fighting finally overwhelmed me. Rachel found me in her guest room that evening, curled into a ball, unable to stop crying. She called in sick for me the next day, and then the next, as I struggled to even get out of bed. The final blow came when I saw on social media that my mother had posted about exciting wedding developments, with a photo of Megan trying on a wedding dress. My wedding dress? The comment section was filled with congratulations and heart emojis, with not a single person questioning the bizarre circumstances. My family had not only accepted the betrayal, they were celebrating it like some kind of fairy tale romance. When the right person comes along, sometimes in unexpected ways, my mother had captioned the photo, as if James had met Megan through a meet-cute at a coffee shop, rather than by cheating on his fiancé with her sister. I blocked them all and turned off my phone. Rock bottom came in the form of a hotel room I couldn't really afford. After 2 weeks of imposing on Rachel's kindness, I had checked into an extended stay hotel, telling myself I needed space to think. The truth was, I couldn't bear to see the pity in her eyes any longer. I sat on the generic floral bedspread, surrounded by takeout containers and unwashed clothes, staring at nothing. I had called in sick to work so many times that my boss had suggested I take a formal leave of absence. My phone remained off, unable to bear seeing more wedding updates or well-meaning messages asking if I was okay. I was not okay. I was the furthest thing from okay. A knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Diane from work stood there with a determined expression and 2 bags of groceries. Rachel told me where to find you, she said, pushing past me into the room. She surveyed the chaos with a raised eyebrow. Well, this won't do at all. What are you doing here? I asked, hugging my arms around myself. Staging an intervention, the real kind, not the gaslighting bullshit your family tried. She began picking up takeout containers, tossing them into the trash. First, you're going to shower while I clean this place up. Then we're going to eat real food and make a plan. I don't want a plan, I said. My voice small. I just want to be left alone. Diane stopped and faced me directly. The Ashley Matthews I know doesn't hide in hotel rooms feeling sorry for herself. She gets mad, gets even, and gets better. That Ashley doesn't exist anymore. Bullshit, Diane said flatly. She's right here. They only have the power you give them, Ash. And right now, you're giving them everything. Something about her words penetrated the fog I had been living in. She was right. I had spent my entire life seeking validation from people who would never give it, bending myself into shapes that weren't mine, in hopes of finally earning their love. And what had it gotten me? A broken heart, a postponed career, and a hotel room that smelled like old Chinese food. I showered while Diane cleaned. The hot water seemed to wash away some of the heaviness I had been carrying. When I emerged, the room was transformed. The bed was made, the trash removed, and the scent of something delicious filled the air. Pasta with actual vegetables, Diane announced, setting 2 plates on the small table by the window. Sit, eat, then we talk. The first bite reminded me that I had been surviving on snacks and takeout for weeks. We ate in silence, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I finished a complete meal. Now, Diane said, pushing her plate away. Let's talk about what doesn't add up about James. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, the guy presents himself as this hotshot investment banker with the penthouse apartment and designer suits. But something always felt off to me. I had never shared my occasional doubts about James's finances with anyone. The way he sometimes seemed strangely anxious about dinner bills. The time his credit card was declined and he blamed it on fraud alerts. The vague explanations about investments that needed time to mature. There were some things, I admitted slowly, small inconsistencies. But I thought maybe that's just how wealthy people are. A different relationship with money. Or maybe he's not as wealthy as he pretends to be, Diane suggested. Have you checked your joint accounts since all this happened? James and I had opened joint savings and checking accounts 6 months earlier, with the understanding that we would fully combine finances after the wedding. I had been making regular deposits from my salary, building what I thought was our future together. I haven't even thought about it, I admitted. Diane passed me my laptop. Check now. The accounts were nearly empty. The savings account that should have contained $30,000 of my money showed a balance of $17.22. The checking account was overdrawn by $400. That son of a bitch, I whispered, staring at the screen. He cleaned them out. When? Diane asked, looking over my shoulder. I checked the transaction history. Multiple large withdrawals over the past month, with the final one the day after I had discovered the affair. He knew, I said, the realization dawning. He knew I would find out eventually. He was preparing for it. Something cold and clarifying replaced the fog of grief. This hadn't just been about love or attraction. This had been calculated. I think, I said slowly, I need to know exactly who I was going to marry. The next morning, I called a private investigator recommended by a colleague who had gone through a messy divorce. The cost made me wince. But I needed answers more than I needed financial security right now. While the investigator began digging, I forced myself to return to work. My boss was understanding but firm. We held your position because you're valuable to this company, she told me. But I need to know you're fully back. Can you handle that? Yes, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I'm ready. Focusing on work-provided structure, my life had been lacking. Each day became a little easier than the last. I found a new apartment, smaller than my previous one, but in a neighborhood I had always loved. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and created new ones under a variation of my name that family wouldn't recognize. 2 weeks later, the investigator's report arrived in my email. I waited until I was home, poured a large glass of wine, and began to read. James Thompson was not the successful investment banker he had portrayed himself to be. While he did work for the firm he had claimed, he was several levels below the position he had described to me. His income was less than half what he had implied. The penthouse apartment was rented, not owned, and he was 3 months behind on payments. Most damning of all, he had significant debt. Credit cards maxed out, a car loan underwater, and a gambling habit documented through multiple visits to casinos in Hammond and online betting sites. He had been sued twice by previous landlords for unpaid rent and had a tax lien against him for unpaid taxes from 3 years prior. The James I had known, the successful, confident man I had agreed to marry, was a carefully constructed fiction. But the most shocking revelation came on the final page of the report. Text messages recovered from a cloud backup revealed that Megan had known about James's financial situation for months. Not only had she known, but she had helped him conceal it from me. She just got that big promotion. Megan had texted him 4 months earlier. Once you're married, her income will cover everything. Just keep her distracted until then. They had been using me, both of them. Not just emotionally, but financially as well. I called Diane immediately. You were right, I said when she answered. He's broke. Worse than broke, he's in serious debt. And Megan knew. She's been helping him hide it from me. Holy shit, Diane breathed. So the affair was at least partly about my money, I confirmed. They were planning to use me until they couldn't anymore. What are you going to do? For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile, not the brittle approximation I had been offering the world. I'm going to let the truth work for me for once. That night, I met with a lawyer to ensure I was protected from any of James's financial maneuvers. I closed our joint accounts and disputed the unauthorized withdrawals. I gathered documentation of every penny I had contributed to our life together and filed for reimbursement. The next day, I changed my appearance drastically. I cut my long auburn hair into a sleek bob and dyed it a rich chocolate brown. I bought new glasses with bold frames that changed the shape of my face. I replaced my wardrobe with pieces that reflected who I wanted to be, not who I had been trying to be for James or my family. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone new, someone stronger, someone who would never again apologize for taking up space in the world. I'll let the truth be my revenge, I told my reflection. No schemes, no plots, just truth. I was done being a victim. I was done seeking validation from people who would never give it. I was done diminishing myself to make others comfortable. It was time for the real Ashley Matthews to stand up. 3 months after discovering the affair, I was thriving professionally in ways I never had before. Freed from the constant drain of seeking approval from James and my family, I channeled all my energy into work. My boss noticed immediately. Whatever lit a fire under you, keep it burning. She told me after I presented a comprehensive digital strategy that landed us 3 new major clients. This is the best work you've ever done. A month later, she called me into her office and offered me a position as Vice President of Marketing Strategy, with a 40% salary increase and equity in the company. I accepted on the spot. Meanwhile, James and Megan's wedding plans continued. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned they had retained all of my original wedding arrangements, including the venue, the flowers, and even the cake design I had spent weeks selecting. The date remained the same, only the bride had changed. I made no move to interfere. I didn't call my parents or send angry messages to James. I didn't post bitter comments on social media. I simply lived my life and waited. The first domino fell when I ran into James's colleague Michael at a networking event. He greeted me warmly, expressing surprise that I was there. "I thought you'd be deep in last-minute wedding planning," he said. "Only 2 weeks to go, right?" "Actually, I'm not the bride anymore," I replied calmly. "My sister is marrying James now." Michael's jaw literally dropped. "Your sister? What the hell happened?" I told him the simple truth without embellishment. How I had caught them together. How my family had taken their side. How I had discovered financial irregularities afterward. "Financial irregularities?" Michael repeated, his expression growing concerned. "What kind?" "Just some unusual transactions," I said vaguely. "I'm sure it's nothing for you to worry about." But it was something for him to worry about, as James's colleague at a financial firm with strict ethical guidelines. The next day, an anonymous tip, not from me, reached James's company about possible financial improprieties. An internal investigation began. At the same time, word began spreading through our social circle. Not because I was broadcasting it, but because people like Michael were genuinely shocked by the situation and mentioned it to others. Diane, loyal friend that she was, made sure to correct any misconceptions with the actual facts whenever the topic arose. No, Ashley didn't drive him away. She caught him in bed with her sister after 6 months of them sneaking around, she would say matter-of-factly. "And yes, it's the same wedding. They're literally using all her plans and the venue she selected." No, her parents weren't upset about it. They actually encouraged it. The simple truth, stated plainly without dramatic embellishment, was more damning than any smear campaign could have been. A week before the wedding, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. "Ashley, it's James. I need your help. Can we meet? Please." I didn't respond, but I saved the message. The next day, another text arrived. "Things are falling apart here. The firm is investigating my accounts. I need $10,000 to clear some things up before the wedding. I can pay you back after. Please." I forwarded the message to Megan with a simple note. "Thought you should see this." 3 days before the wedding, the final blow fell. James was fired from his firm for financial misrepresentation. He had been inflating his client returns while covering losses with money from new clients, a mini Ponzi scheme that had finally collapsed under scrutiny. The news traveled quickly through professional circles. My parents called in a panic. "Ashley," my mother said, her voice tearful, "did you know about James's financial problems?" "Yes," I replied simply. "I found out after I caught him with Megan." "Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of trying to sabotage their happiness out of jealousy?" The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "I'm so sorry," my mother finally whispered. "We should have listened to you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." "Can we meet? Your father and I want to apologize properly." "I'm not interested in your apology right now," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not today." The wedding was canceled amid a flurry of recriminations and public embarrassment. James, facing potential legal charges from his firm, disappeared overnight, leaving Megan to deal with the fallout alone. My parents were stuck with thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits and a daughter whose reputation was in tatters. 3 days after the canceled wedding date, Megan showed up at my new apartment. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was back to blonde, but limp and unwashed. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked thinner than I had ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she asked in a small voice. Against my better judgment, I let her in. "He's gone," she said once she was seated on my couch. "James took what money we had left and disappeared. He told me he was going to fix things, and then I never heard from him again." "I'm sorry," I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. Not because I forgave her, but because I knew the pain of James's betrayal firsthand. "Did you know?" she asked, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "About the money? About his job? Did you know all along?" "No," I replied truthfully. "I found out after I caught you together. I hired an investigator." Megan nodded slowly. "I knew," she admitted. "Not everything, but enough. He told me he had some financial problems, but that marrying you would solve them because of your career. When we started seeing each other, he told me he'd figure out a different solution. Like marrying you instead?" She had the grace to look ashamed. "I thought he loved me. I really did. But he was using both of us, wasn't he?" "Yes," I said simply. "He was." "I've competed with you my whole life," Megan said softly. "You were always the smart one, the successful one. Mom and Dad praised you for your grades and your ambition, even while they were telling you to be more like me. I was so jealous of you, Ashley. When you brought James home and he was so perfect, I wanted to win, just once." I studied my sister, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. She had been as shaped by our parents' dysfunctional love as I had been, just in different ways. "You didn't win," I pointed out. "Neither did I. James was the only winner, until he wasn't." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Not just for James, but for everything. For all the times I took what was yours. For not being the sister you deserved." I didn't rush to absolve her. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said honestly. "But I don't hate you either. I just need space from all of you right now." After she left, I felt strangely lighter. Not because I had enjoyed her suffering, but because I had finally spoken my truth without apology or qualification. A week later, my parents invited me to dinner. I accepted, setting clear boundaries in advance that this was not a reconciliation, merely a conversation. We met at a neutral restaurant downtown. My mother began crying the moment she saw me, my father looking older than I had ever seen him. "We failed you," he said simply. "As parents, we failed you completely. And I don't know if we can ever make that right." "You chose Megan over me my entire life," I replied, the words I had never allowed myself to speak before. "And when it mattered most, you did it again. You were willing to celebrate her relationship with my fiancé, knowing it began as a betrayal." "We were wrong," my mother said. "So terribly wrong. We didn't see what we were doing to you, how we were hurting you." "I needed you," I said, my voice breaking despite my resolve to remain calm. "I needed my parents to protect me, to stand up for me, and you never did." "We want to try again," my father said, "to be better parents to you, if you'll let us." I looked at these two people who had shaped so much of my life, for better and worse. I don't know if that's possible, I told them honestly. But I'm willing to find out. Slowly, with boundaries. That night, I realized something profound. The fantasy family I had spent my life trying to create, the perfect relationship I had convinced myself I had with James, the ideal life I had been striving for, none of it had been real. And losing those illusions, painful as it was, had freed me to build something authentic. I no longer needed to win my parents' approval or a man's love to validate my worth. I had found that worth within myself, in the quiet moments of rebuilding my life from the ashes of betrayal. I had lost what I thought I wanted, but gained what I actually needed: myself. 1 year after my life imploded, I barely recognized the woman I had become, and that was a good thing. I had moved into a spacious loft in downtown Chicago, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. My promotion to vice president had come with another raise and increased responsibilities that challenged me daily. I had made real friends, people who valued me for myself rather than what I could do for them. Most importantly, I had learned to value myself. The healing hadn't happened overnight. For months, I had woken with that familiar ache in my chest, the sense of betrayal still fresh. I had invested in weekly therapy sessions, working through not just the trauma of James and Megan's betrayal, but the deeper wounds inflicted by years of conditional love from my parents. You're grieving multiple losses, my therapist had pointed out. The loss of your relationship, the loss of your family as you knew it, and the loss of the future you had imagined. That's a lot for anyone to process. Slowly, I had built new routines. Morning runs along Lake Michigan. Cooking classes where I learned to make elaborate meals just for myself. A book club where I met women who became genuine friends. Small pleasures that gradually expanded into a life that felt authentically mine. 6 months after the canceled wedding, I had cautiously begun dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee or dinner with men who seemed interesting. And no, I was transparent about my past, unwilling to build another relationship on shaky foundations. Most appreciated the honesty, though some were understandably wary of the dramatic backstory. Then I met Daniel, an architect who approached relationships with the same straightforward integrity he brought to his designs. No games, no manipulation, just authentic connection. We had been seeing each other for 3 months, taking things slowly, building trust one honest conversation at a time. I like who you are, he told me one evening as we walked along the lakefront. Not who you might become, or what you can do for me. Just you, exactly as you are right now. It was such a simple statement, but it brought tears to my eyes because no one had ever loved me that way before, without conditions or expectations. The true test of my growth came unexpectedly at an industry conference in San Francisco. I had just finished giving a presentation when I spotted a familiar figure in the back of the room. James looked different, thinner, his designer suit replaced by off-the-rack business casual. He was wearing a name badge from a small regional firm I had never heard of. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I was catapulted back to that devastating day when I had found him with my sister. But the pain didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace. He approached hesitantly after the crowd had dispersed. Ashley, you look amazing. Thank you, I said simply. I owe you an apology, he began. What we did, it was unforgivable. Yes, I agreed, it was. He seemed taken aback by my directness. The old Ashley would have rushed to make him feel better, to smooth over the awkwardness. The new Ashley simply waited. I lost everything, he continued. My job, my reputation. I had to start over at an entry-level position. It's been humbling. I imagine it has, I said. Not unkindly, but without offering absolution. I think about you a lot, he admitted. About how differently things could have gone if I had been honest. If I had been worthy of you. I considered his words carefully before responding. I think things went exactly as they needed to, James. And, two, I'm happier now than I ever was when we were together, because that relationship wasn't built on truth. Neither of us was being authentic. He nodded slowly. I'm glad one of us found happiness at least. As we parted ways, I felt no desire to ask about Megan, no curiosity about what had become of my parents. That chapter of my life was closed, not forgotten, but no longer defining my present or future. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Megan had moved back home with our parents, that she was working at a local boutique and taking community college classes, that she rarely dated and seemed subdued, humbled by the experience. I wished her well from a distance, but had no desire to resurrect our sisterhood. My parents continued to reach out periodically with careful texts and voicemails. I responded when I felt capable of maintaining boundaries, which was increasingly often as my healing progressed. We had shared a meal every few months, awkward at first, but gradually finding a new way to relate as adults rather than falling into our old patterns. I doubted we would ever be close, but we were finding a way to coexist with respect, if not deep intimacy. The greatest gift of this painful journey had been the discovery of my own worth, separate from others' validation. I had spent my entire life seeking approval, contorting myself to fit others' expectations, believing that love had to be earned through achievement or accommodation. Now, I understood that real love, including self-love, came from authenticity, not performance. I had also learned the power of truth, not as a weapon to hurt others, but as a light that eventually exposes what is real and what is illusion. I hadn't needed elaborate revenge schemes or public humiliation campaigns. I had simply needed to stand in my truth and let reality do the rest. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a better one. Not because losing James was a blessing in disguise. He never had been the person I thought I loved. Not because my family's rejection had been some karmic gift. It had been genuinely painful. But because these losses had forced me to find the inner resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I no longer smiled because I had won some imaginary competition with my sister. I smiled because I had found genuine contentment that wasn't dependent on anyone else's choices or validation. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us not to bitterness, but to wisdom. Not to walls around our hearts, but to better boundaries and deeper authenticity. Not to victimhood, but to victory over our own limiting beliefs. The family that had failed me, the fiancé who had betrayed me, the sister who had competed with me, they had all played their roles in my story. But they no longer wrote my chapters. That power belonged to me alone. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to a better version of yourself? Drop a comment below and let me know how you turned pain into power. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of transformation. Share this video with someone who might need to know that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to finding what you truly need. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who failed to see it.